What up, Wizards? It's Dev from the place. We like it at Magic, but we also like it at Final Fantasy around here a lot. At least I do. So I guess it's good for me then that there's a whole Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering crossover set coming out real soon. And with previews less than a week away now, I figured it'd be a good time to kind of sit down and talk about some of the stuff I want to see most from this set. Because for a lot of reasons, this set is going to be especially important to me. Now look, I'm not going to belabor the point too much here because I've said before on the channel how much I love Final Fantasy, how much it means to me, how it was one of the first video games I ever played, the first one when I was like 5 years old, how I bonded with my dad over it before he passed, and how I might not even have been as into Magic the Gathering if I hadn't have loved Final Fantasy so much. So again, I won't belabor the point, although I fear I've just done that here, but put another way, this is my Lord of the Rings. This is the Magic the Gathering set that I've kind of been waiting my entire life for. So that said, I have some opinions and I can't wait to share them today, aka spout them into the void of the internet like any red-blooded idiot would, but we all get something out of it. I get to do one of those videos where I make Final Fantasy cards, like custom Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy cards, and you get to tell me how broken my cards are and how dumb I am. You always seem to enjoy that when we get to do these kinds of videos. So with that said, I think that's enough intro. Let's talk about the 10 things I want to see in Final Fantasy.
And I'm your favorite Magic channel's favorite Magic channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech.
And we're back. Make sure you do all the YouTube stuff, but I'm not going to spend too much time on the call to action here because I can't wait to talk about Final Fantasy stuff on my Magic the Gathering YouTube channel. I never thought I'd be able to do that outside of maybe dropping like a random midweek Final Fantasy VI speed run on the channel for no apparent reason. I still might do that, but today I actually get to talk about Magic and Final Fantasy at the same time, so I want to get to the honorable mentions here. Now, one thing I should say is that obviously there's going to be a lot of Legendaries on the list proper because there's a lot of memorable characters and side characters from Final Fantasy games, but honestly there's not a whole lot of recurring characters in the series except for, I guess, like Sid. In Biggs and Wedge, there's a few, but mostly the recurring characters between games are the enemies, and these aren't going to be legendary, but I do want to see a bunch of them, and they've started us off right. We've already got to see Tonberry in some of these previews, signaling that there are going to be some random enemy encounters in this set, and I really like that, and there's a few that I want to see above the others, right? Like, I'd love to see the Behemoth. I'd love to see how they represent the bomb, right? How does it self-destruct, whatever. But the thing that I probably want to see most from the enemy bestiary in Final Fantasy games is probably the Malboro. Now, my rendition of the Malboro over here doesn't do anything too wacky. I didn't want it to feel like a legendary creature and have like this really unique ability, but I did want it to be strong, and I do think that something like this could end up being like a standard sideboard staple in Golgari mid-range decks. I've got this down as 4 mana, 2 a black and a green for a 3/3 plant horror, and it's got bad breath. When it enters the battlefield, all of your opponent's guys get -2/-2 till end of turn. Now, you could make that all other creatures or just all creatures if you wanted to be a little bit more symmetrical, but honestly, there's a lot of design space to explore with Bad Breath or just the Malboro as a creature in general, right? You could have Bad Breath give their creatures stun counters, or Malboro itself could have Wither or Infect. These are like fairly on flavor abilities for it to have. It could have Death Touch. That makes a bit of sense too. So again, with not just this enemy really, but I guess part of my wider point here is that a lot of different Final Fantasy enemies, Magic Pot, that's another good one that you see in a lot of different Final Fantasy games, could have some pretty cool abilities. But on to the big list here, which is essentially just all my favorite characters in Final Fantasy that must be in this set and that we have not yet seen. We've already seen a lot of characters I really like, so I guess that means I don't have to worry about putting them in this video, but there's still a bunch that I really hope are in this set, and most of them I bet are, but number 10, I'm not too sure about. I feel like they would have really missed hard if they don't print an Ultros. Everybody loves Uncle Ulti, man. My version of him over here is just 2 mana, Dimir colors, for a 2/2, and you can tap him down, pay 1, and tap him down to put a stun counter on another creature, and 2 tentacle counters on him. Now, eventually I got to this other mode on him, remove 8 tentacle counters from him. Do you see how creative that is? To gain control of target creature. Originally, this put 8 +1/+1 counters on him, but that seemed kind of vanilla, and I actually wanted something that better represented Ultros's like manipulative nature, so I felt like gaining control was actually a little bit cooler, but also I would kind of like this as a commander because there's a lot of like blue-black proliferate tricks you could use to get counters on him faster. He could even go in a standard blue-black tempo deck, although I do think that things like Flood Pit's Drowner are probably better for those purposes, but you might still run a one-of ulti in a deck like that and get to tapping stuff down, snagging creatures sometimes. He's even a rogue, so he works in blue-black rogue decks in like Pioneer or whatever if you want to throw him in. But just like the last entry, and I'll probably do this for most entries, just letting you know, there's a lot you could do with Ultros I didn't do here. I leaned into the manipulative nature for some of his abilities and the fact that he can cast blind for his other abilities. But, maybe when he comes into play, he makes a little Chupon token that does something, a big Chupon token that does something. Again, there's other ways to explore this design. I just ultimately want to see an Ultros. But sticking with Final Fantasy VI, it's a really good game, guys. I've got another character that I'm pretty sure would be on everyone's list if they were going to do a video like this. It's Mog. Now, I've already had somebody tell me that my version of Mog is super busted, and honestly, I don't think that it is. Now, the Mog I made is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 2/3 legendary Moogle rogue whose power and toughness should be adjusted downwards, I think, but that's not the broken thing about him. In this case, you're going to pay 1 and tap him, and he dances. So just like Final Fantasy VI, what he does is dependent on what terrain he's visited. So if you have a plains, you gain 1 life. If you have an island, you loot, draw, discard. If you have a swamp, each opponent loses 1 life. If you have a mountain, deal a damage to any target. And if you have a forest, then a creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. But honestly, don't pay too much attention to how I specifically made this one version of the card. All I'm really trying to say with this design is that I want Mog to dance. It's one of my favorite, unique mechanical abilities for any character in any Final Fantasy game, and I think that something like this would be the best way to represent it. All that said, though, should this ability be sorcery speed only? I don't know. Look, if you think this guy is busted, just wait till you see Rydia later. You're going to chew me up for how insane that card looks, I'm sure. But let's move on here to Final Fantasy VII technically, but kind of every Final Fantasy game, and take a look at the Masamune. Or, as 5 to 30-year-old Dev would say, the Masamune, which I still think sounds honestly cooler, but one way or the other. This is 3 mana for a legendary equipment that costs 4 to equip, but if you equip it to a wizard, warrior, or legendary creature, it only costs 2 to equip. The creature gets +3/+0, plus first strike, reach, and vigilance, and it also turns the creature into a royal assassin. The creature gets tap, destroy target tapped creature. I tried to call back to a few things with this. First of all, the special equip cost. I think that Warrior is kind of obvious for Final Fantasy games, but Legendaries because there's a few important characters that carry the Masamune around, notably Sephiroth, right? But also, in the very first Final Fantasy game, the best thing you can do with the Masamune that you get at the end of the game is equip it to your white mage, and I wanted to call back to that a little bit, so it's also cheap to equip to wizards. But the reason it turns your creatures into royal assassins is because I wanted it to call back to the thing that Sephiroth does to Aerith. Spoilers? You guys need a spoiler alert for this game? I feel like even people who have never played the game know this scene, but one way or the other. The last thing I wanted it to do was illustrate that it's extremely outrageously long. So with that in mind, it doesn't give you much of a defense bonus, but it does give you vigilance, because it turns out that sometimes the best defense is a 20-foot pointy stick, but it also gives you first strike because it's really, really long. You'll probably strike first with a sword that big, and it's got reach. Mostly for comedic value. It's so long it hits flyers. But anyway, I honestly hope that if they do a Masamune card, and they kind of better, that it's a little more creative than my design. But we'll move to Final Fantasy IV for number 7 here. Kind of a confusing statement, but so are the numbering conventions of Final Fantasy games. But either way, we're going to look at maybe one of the coolest characters from this whole game full of cool characters, and that is Kain the Dragoon. Now, not only does Kain have the coolest armor in any Final Fantasy game, and it's really not even close, he also has one of the coolest abilities that would end up becoming kind of a mainstay of the series, Jump, and I wanted to illustrate that somehow with his cards. The way we did this here is that he has Simic colors, just a blue and a green for a 2/3 legendary human soldier. That can make some degree of sense, and he has Jump, so when he enters the battlefield or when he phases in, he deals damage equal to his power to target creature an opponent controls, but you can phase him out forcibly by paying Simic colors. Now, to kind of pat myself on the back just a little bit. Sorry about that in advance. I do think that in a lot of ways, phasing is the best mechanical way to represent the jump ability within Magic the Gathering's rule set, because jump is an ability where the character is still technically part of the fight, but can't be seen or interacted with by any of the other characters. And phasing works a lot better for the jump ability than, say, exiling the creature and returning it to the battlefield. If you did that, it would lose all of its auras and equipments and stuff like that. And that does not happen when someone in Final Fantasy jumps. So again, I think phasing is the correct way to do it here. This is another card I've already previewed on socials and people have told me it's busted or whatever. And since I previewed it on socials, I've switched its power and toughness so it can't take down 3 toughness creatures, which is, you know, a little bit nerfing, but I could still see thinking this is a little bit much, especially for Simic. Now, ultimately, there's a lot of ways you could make this card, whether you're trying to do something with the jump ability, or maybe you're doing something with the aspects of his character, like the fact that he got mind controlled for a while. Maybe that is a thing that you could do something design-wise with. Either way, I think Kain is just a really awesome character that a lot of people have love for. So just like the rest of the entrants on the list, it doesn't have to do this specifically, and it doesn't even have to do a thing with jump. Just as long as you make a Kain card, I'll be kind of happy with that result. Now we're going to stick with Final Fantasy IV for number 6 here and talk about another one of my favorite characters in any FF game. It's Tella, the Sage. Yeah, you spoony bard, probably one of the most memeable lines in all of Final Fantasy comes out of this guy's mouth, but he's also a really cool and tragic character that I've loved since I was like 7 years old. So with that said, how did I make my Tella? Well, this is 5 mana, 2 in Grixis colors, for a 1/2 legendary human wizard, and he's got Magecraft. This is the only wizard I made with Magecraft. I was able to keep myself from overusing that ability somehow. But in this case, whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you're going to put an arcane counter on Tella. And he can also eventually, for 7 mana, cast the legendary, the Fearsome Meteo. This is going to deal quad 9s to each creature on the battlefield, and every player is going to choose 5 lands they control and sacrifice the rest. But you can only do Meteo if Tella has 5 arcane counters on him. Now, personally, I kind of feel like this is the weakest card that I made for this entire video, but again, shared it on socials and people were like, well, this is busted. Not at all, dude. It takes 5 instants or sorceries being cast or copied on your side to actually cast this 7 mana spell he's got, printed on him. And again, you have to pay 7 mana for the spell, right? I'd say the best way to use this in Commander as your commander would be to play him alongside, Boros Reckoners and Screaming Nemesises and stuff like that. Creatures that, when you deal damage to them, they strike back at something else because, you could turn that quad 9s into quad 9s to an opponent. So again, I think there'd be fun ways to leverage this as your commander, but it still costs 5 mana for a 1/2 that you have to spend more mana, spend more cards from your hand to actually pay the 7 mana. Again, I think this card is fairly weak. It's just kind of a meme. And that's what I wanted. I wanted Meteo to be a spell. And I think the best way to do that is to just put it on Tella. But number 5 is another spellcaster that I do think you could easily do something unique with, given what he actually does in the game. We're going to look at Final Fantasy VI again for number 5. Again, that can get real confusing if you let it. But anyway, let's take a look at Strago, Blue Mage. I wanted something to represent the blue magic as is defined by Final Fantasy and not Magic the Gathering, right? This sort of enemy skill materia magic. And I figured that Strago's lore ability was the better way to do that. So this is a 4 mana, in this case 2 and 2 blue, 1/3 legendary human wizard. Whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, you get to exile a copy of that spell, and for as long as the copy remained exiled, you can cast it, and you can spend mana of any type to cast spells this way. Now, the one piece of constructive and probably necessary criticism that I got when I put some of these cards on socials was for this card. I had Galleon tell me that Strago's lore ability uses enemy skills, not necessarily like your opponent. So maybe it could copy creature abilities or something. And yeah, that is definitely a direction you could take the card in and would make even more sense. But I, for one, would love having a guy in the command zone that just dares your opponent to cast spells like this, You probably have to have counter shields up when you play your Strago because the first thing they try to do is kill your Strago, you know what I mean? So you got to have some sort of, protection spell or negate or something up when you cast him. And you might even have to have multiple of them up when you cast him. But one way or the other, I just really like the idea of a commander like this. Let's move on to one of my favorite characters in any Final Fantasy. I could say that for all these the entries, and I probably have. It kind of goes without saying, but everyone loves Rydia. Rydia is a character very near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, and I've already told you, she's going to be kind of busted. So if you don't mind, let me read this because I had to word it a very strange way. The front half of Rydia is Rydia the Caller. 2 mana, it's 1 and a green for a 1/1 legendary human druid in this case. When it enters, search your library for an enchantment creature saga card, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle up, and then, when a saga you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you can transform Rydia. She becomes Rydia High Summoner, a 1/4 legendary human wizard now. You can pay 1 and a green and tap her to search your library for a creature card, put it into your hand, shuffle up, only cast this at sorcery speed or use this at sorcery speed. But of course, whenever you cast a creature spell, you get to untap Rydia, meaning that you can use her tutor for a creature ability more than once in a turn. Now, if you're wondering why the front side of it is worded like so weird on the tutor ability, it's because Wizards is making summon creatures. I guess they've been making summon creatures since 1993, but you know what I mean. They are making summon spells for this set. So they're going to take the form of sagas that are also creatures. We've already seen summon Shiva. Either way, we're going to have summon cards in this set, and I wanted Rydia's front half to go and get one of those summon cards when she ETB'd. Now, once she becomes, levels up, once she gets lost in the shipwreck and goes to the underworld and gets raised by the gods for a while, and then you encounter her again and she's all grown up and whatever, and she's a better spellcaster, a better summoner that just summons all these crazy monsters. You're like, oh wow, you're the best character in this game. Once that happens, I feel like she's better at magic. So instead of getting specifically one time a summon, saga, now she can go get any creature you want. And when you do summon a creature with her on your side of the table, she gets to untap and do it again. Now, this is really mana intensive. I want to remind everybody. Untapping her, using her again, casting a creature, untapping her, using her again, costs all of the mana in the world. But maybe you've got all the mana in the world. I guess my point with this card, if I needed one to begin with, was that if you're going to have summon sagas in your set, then maybe one of your summoners, like Rydia or Yuna, right, can go and get those, can interact with those in some way or another. So that's kind of what I meant to do with this. And if you are going to do something like that, Wizards of the Coast, you don't have to make the back half as insane as I kind of made it here, just so long as you do it. But now we move into the top 3, and we get to talk about my favorite card that I made for the video. Like, the card that I want to play with the absolute most and put in my command zone. And can I come over to your house and do that? Can I print out a copy of Vivy Black Mage and come to your house for a game of Commander and you'll actually let me play with it? I sure hope so. Vivy over here, another character that everyone loves, it ain't just me, is Esper colors, white, black, blue, for, in this case, a 1/2 legendary elemental wizard. Vivy is not a human. Do you want me to get wonky on you when it comes to the I'm a Vorthos for Final Fantasy. Not as much of a Vorthos for Magic the Gathering, but I will come at you when it comes to Final Fantasy. But either way, this guy has 2 abilities. Whenever you cast an instant spell, you're going to loot. Draw a card, then discard a card. Whenever you cast a sorcery spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. I love slinging spells, and so does Vivy. Look, I wanted to do something with like his trance mode abilities, but ultimately, I just ended up making a card that I really like to play with. I think when you're making custom cards sometimes, sure, you have to like invoke the flavor of the card and the story that they've told and but sometimes you just really need to make a card that you want to play with, and Vivy is that. I think we're going to get a version of Vivy basically no matter what happens, right? But it's probably not going to be this one. I think I'm the farthest off on this one of any card that I've made so far, but still, Wizards, if you're watching, and you're probably not, but just in case you are, Blake Rasmussen, do you still watch my videos? I hope you do. If you're watching, put this one in the file. It doesn't have to be Vivy. I just want to play with this card eventually. But here at number 2, we're finally going to do a Final Fantasy game that isn't Final Fantasy 6 or 4. Let's talk a little bit about Final Fantasy 7. I guess we already have. If you want to count the Masamune, we kind of already have. But let's talk about the walking hot topic that is so near and dear to so many people's hearts. I know how much you guys like old Vincent Valentine. So here's Vincent, the Patient Vengeance. This guy right here is Mardu colors, red, white, black, for a 3/4 legendary human mutant mercenary with vigilance. Whenever Vincent takes damage, if that damage does not destroy him, you get to transform him. He transforms into Vincent the Hellmasker. This is a 5/5 legendary mutant horror with Menace, Death Touch, and Indestructible, which attacks each turn if able. And at the beginning of your end step, you transform the Hellmasker. I wanted something to illustrate limit breaks from Final Fantasy VII in this design, and note that the way this is worded, he can block, and he actually blocks really well because of the vigilance, right? But he can block a creature and transform that turn, and he won't untransform again back into regular Vincent until the end of your end step. So again, I kind of wanted to illustrate a limit breaky kind of thing here where he can block and take some damage against another creature, and then on your turn, bang in as the Hellmasker. And I guess the 4 toughness means that if worse comes to worse, you can hit him with your own lightning bolt on your first main phase and swing him with the Hellmasker that way too. So I don't know, a few different ways I tried to kind of work with this card here, but this is another one of those where, like, as long as you give us Vinny Valentine, I will be happy. But now it's time for number 1, which is not only my favorite concept in any Final Fantasy game, because it's been in a few Final Fantasy games, starting with the very first one, but it's also probably easily the most broken card that I made for the video. But I don't care if the cards I make are broken, because they will never exist. So with that in mind, let's take a look at something that absolutely must be in this set somewhere to my standards, and that is the Red Mage. Now, for clarification, the Red Mage is a job class in and of itself in like Final Fantasy V and also Final Fantasy XIV. There's a whole group of Red Mages, so yes, that exists. But this Red Mage references specifically one of the 4 Warriors of Light from the first game, so all of those would be legendary, but this doesn't necessarily have to be legendary. Either way, that's a whole thought process I went on, and now you have to do that too. But either way, this is a single red mana for a 2/1 legendary human wizard warrior, and when it enters or attacks, it deals 1 damage to any target. You can also pay a single red mana and cast Temper. Basically, it's going to get +2/+0 till end of turn, but you can only do this once each turn. So if you're counting in your head, that means that you can deal 6 damage to your opponent before they have dropped their second land. That's pretty wild. You could actually deal 7 to them by turn 2 if you drop a second Red Mage, because it will also deal a damage to your opponent, so that's kind of cute. But still, this is going to tie up some of your mana in the early game if you actually want to use it that way. Still, I will acknowledge that a Savannah Lions that is also an Orcish Bowmasters is pretty good. He's got like a wacky fire breathing ability on her, so yeah, I probably went a little bit too far on this, but I just really wanted to illustrate, a wizard warrior. Again, the Red Mage is one of my favorite concepts in Final Fantasy because I like the idea of a super well-rounded spellcaster that also knows how to use a sword. Why would that not be a thing? Also, they have the absolute best steez of any characters in all of Final Fantasy. There is absolutely no discounting the drip on these people, one way or the other. That is all of the cards that I made for this video, but that's not all the stuff that I want to see. I want them to go really, really deep here. You know what I mean? Like, I would like to see a Delta Sisters card. You guys know the Delta Sisters? They've actually been in more than Final Fantasy IV, but that was probably their most famous appearance. Siegfried from Final Fantasy VI, whether it's the crappy, cowardly, he kind of sucks at fighting Siegfried, or the Siegfried that you encounter in the Colosseum later that's like, oh, there's an imposter running around, and you're like, oh, that's why you're so easy to beat. So again, there's a lot of like weird ancillary characters that I would love to hear from in this set. Matoya, the witch from Final Fantasy I, she's looking for her crystal and she can't find it, so she can't see or whatever. And she turns out she's in a bunch of FF games too. There's just so much that I want out of this set. Just put it that way, and I'll be happy if I even get half of it. And that's it for this one. Look, make sure you go down there and tell me which of my cards were the most busted. I know how much you love to do that. Although, I gotta say, with power creep, I don't even think I'm that far ahead of the curve. But most importantly, let me know what you want from this set if you're a Final Fantasy head. And even if you're not a Final Fantasy head, you just played a couple of them. I played Final Fantasy VII when I was 17, and I would like to see the Emerald Weapon in this set. Yes, actually, I would too. Do all the YouTube stuff. I'll actually go a little bit more in depth. You can hit the button shaped like a thumb. You could hit the button shaped like the word subscribe. That'll subscribe you to the channel. Or you can check out the Patreon. $1 a month to get in on the ground floor and start voting on what content we do around here. The patrons didn't vote for this one. They voted for the Jeskai Counterburn deck we're going to do next. That's going to be our next video. But I also get to do whatever videos I want from time to time. And I fear they wouldn't have voted for this one, so I just get to do it. Anyway, vote on content on the Patreon, $1 a month, link in the description. And apart from that, I guess I'm donezo for this onezo, and that is Allski Kowalski. So I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.